Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to give folks a couple seconds to continue to filter into the chat, into the room. And like I always like to say, please enjoy the screen, enjoy the nice slide. Kind of get you started get you in the mindset of where we're going. Okay. All right. So welcome again. My name is Jenna Quinn, and it is my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of the 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. I want to inform you that this session is being recorded. And it will be available on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. For those of you who are joining us today live, we want to go ahead and encourage you to use the Q&A box to submit your questions for our guest speaker today. You don't have to wait until the end. Just go ahead whenever a question pops into your head. Just go ahead and submit it, and we'll hopefully get to it as soon as possible. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our moderator today. John Broadway is a proud alumnus of CSULB, graduating in 2017 with a degree in journalism. As a student, he was very involved in campus life, and as president ambassador, founding president of the National Association of Black Journalists, and participant in the Leadership Academy. John has found a way to merge his passion of filmmaking and social justice through his production company, Artivists United, which produces films, events, and merchandise that merge art and activism. He has remained involved with the beach as an active volunteer, and we're very thankful for his time. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for the chat, John Broadway.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Jenna Quinn. And I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest panelist today for the 49er chat, Mr. Jay Young. He's a Warner Brothers veteran. He's been part of the Warner Brothers consumer products business for 25 years. And in his current role, he's responsible for developing and implementing creative support plans, strategies on all of Warner Brothers properties in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He also works closely with key business partners to maximize Warner Brothers portfolio on the product. I'm sorry, I got mixed up. So on Warner Brothers Discovery Company is one of the leading licensing and entertainment organizations in the world. Warner Brothers Consumer Products, remit includes all of Warner Brothers films, television, and animated properties. It's an extensive portfolio that features some of the world's most iconic entertainment properties and brands, including Batman, Superman, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, and Tom and Jerry. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Jay Young.
Thank you, John. God, it's really strange staring at myself for all that time, that picture of myself. So there you go. I appreciate the introduction. I was going to start by kind of taking you guys on a little bit of a journey from the beginning when I started kind of realizing I need to make a living for myself and through to the present. So I got a presentation to do that, but if there's any questions along the way that you want to ask, just drop them in the chat or don't hesitate to interrupt my my ramblings, or if I am rambling, please remind me to stop, because I tend to do that sometimes. So let me share my presentation if I can. And you guys tell me whether you've got the presentation. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, the 45-year journey. I started at work when I was 5 years old, obviously. But I'm really 64 years old this year. Got one more year to my retirement. So this it's kind of timely for me. I like the idea of talking about it because I haven't really stopped in all that time to look back and say what things were important about this long journey that I've been on. So this is me when I started the journey in high school, a little bit different than the way I look now. I guess the hairstyle is obviously different. The eyes are a little bit baggier, but the smile is still the same. And I think that that's quite telling. The reason I think that smile is there from then to now is really something that my father said to me when I first started my journey at university was make sure you love what you do. And that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about here is what that means. What does it mean, love what you do? And a lot of times I think people think about the job that they're doing. So, you know, do I want to be a writer? Do I want to be a filmmaker? Do I want to be a doctor or a lawyer? But over the years, I've found out that I think it's something else. I think that because I've done a lot of different jobs over the years. For me personally, the things that I love, that I've found out that I love, are I love solving problems. I love trying to understand the human condition. And I love looking for things people don't have time to see. And that a lot of creatives, I think, do that as well. But it's not just being an artist or a filmmaker or a writer where you can use those skills. And it's only recently that I found out that this was the connected fiber between all the things that I've done over the years. And now I try to tell everyone else, find that, especially early in your career or even when you're at university. I've got, both my kids are at university now, and we, over COVID lockdown, we talked a lot about what is it you want to do? What do you love to do? And it wasn't always about the topic and the subject. It was more about the things that the subject brought to them. And it made me think about that as well. It also made me realize that the journey wasn't that straight. So for me, what I know now, it would have been a lot less stressful if I knew these things. So if I can pass on some of that to you guys now, that would be great. And I'm just going to kind of touch on a few key moments in time for me. So starting in high school, I was the first one to go to university in my family. So my parents didn't talk to me over and over about what I was going to do at university like we did with our kids. I really had a high school counselor to go to. And the only thing I was good at, I was good at art. I wasn't that great of a student. So I went in wanting to go into the arts, and the counselor said, well, your grades you're only getting B's. It's a very competitive field. If you're not getting top marks in your class, you really should think of something else. What about if you don't know what you want to do? Why don't you start with a business course? So I listened to the counselor and said, sure, I'll start I'll start at a business school. Some of my friends were doing it. But what that counselor didn't know is that I was only getting B's because I didn't do all the projects, but the projects I did were top marks. I just wasn't as engaged in things that weren't of interest to me. So I kind of missed a beat there by not listening to myself and taking guidance from somebody else. Business school, while it's been really important through my career, it definitely wasn't something I was going to survive in. I learned much later in life that I'm quite dyslexic. I learned it when my daughter was tested and they found that she was, and they said, oh, by the way, you are too, which is why I seem to have always gravitated towards verbal language and visual stimuli as opposed to the written word. So classic academia was really difficult for me. My friends, we studied exactly the same. We took the exact same courses. They were getting A's. I was getting D's. So it didn't work out that well for me. And there was a period where I had to leave school because of an illness. And I came back, had a semester where I could just do electives. And I did all of this, the whole semester, I just did art electives at this junior college, Orange Cut OCC down in Newport Beach. And when I took these classes, the teachers were like, why isn't your major art? You're really good. So I just used that as a catalyst to say, yeah, okay, I want to shift. I'm gonna put my attention where I wanted to originally, thinking that business course or that year of business was a waste of time. In the long run, it wasn't. It was really valuable. But I switched to an AA degree at the junior college level because there's no way I was going to get the grades to get straight into university. There was no way I was gonna survive the SATs. So I took the long route. I did my time, got my AA degree, and that's how I got into Cal State Long Beach. So knowing that I didn't have to depend on this one day when I was going to take a test, whether it was going to work or not. It was a 2-year period that it got me to a place of maturity where I was kind of mature enough to take on this idea of going to university. And Cal State Long Beach had a really good reputation, one of the best art schools on the West Coast. It was very competitive. So it was quite challenging and pretty intimidating as well. I didn't live on campus. I lived in Newport. I had lived there for a while. My parents were lucky, and I was lucky enough to have my parents support me living there. They had many years ago, before houses were millions of dollars, had owned a small property in Newport that I was lucky enough to be able to stay at during uni. So I went from there to school every day. So it was more like a commute for me. But when I got there, it was quite intimidating because the level of talent and the people that I was engaging with on a creative level had kind of elevated to a whole new level. But similar to the experience at high school and the counselors, I was kind of coming across a similar challenge. So I didn't have a specific discipline in the arts that I had signed up for. You have to submit a portfolio to get into the actual schools of illustration or the schools of fine art or the industrial design school. So I was still trying to figure out where could I get in to get this Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. The illustration teachers said I was a graphic designer. The graphic design teacher said I was a better illustrator. I wasn't fitting into any box. Industrial design, I loved it, but I couldn't do the maths. So I kept trying to find where's the crack in the armor that can get me in. And I decided to focus on the fine art school and submit my portfolio of paintings that were a combination of design, paintings, illustrations. And the first time I tried, they weren't too, I didn't get in, basically. So they said, come back, try again next term. I tried again, still didn't get in. I came back a third time. I got in the third time. I always say that I think I got in just because they didn't want to look at my artwork anymore. They just wanted to get me through the system. But that's the story that my kids are sick of hearing, the fact that it took me 3 times to get in. And that stuck with me pretty much in everything that I've done since, knowing that, don't take no for an answer. The high school counselor shouldn't have taken no for an answer, for an answer. Business school actually was a good experience that I wouldn't have taken otherwise. So each one of these things had their value, but really, if you really want something, it's really important to stick to it. And I came to that conclusion in my final year at Cal State Long Beach. I still was intimidated. Really good artists, really good, much better artists than I was. But I noticed people started kind of dropping out. And there was a number of reasons. And some people, it was out of their own control. They had family problems or financial issues that were, beyond their control, and it made it difficult for them to stay. But other people just didn't like listening and taking advice from other people, and they wanted to, do their own thing and didn't like the variety that was forced on you at university. They didn't like the critique system where you were constantly being criticized. And little by little, I started kind of climbing up the ladder. And the next thing I know, these people that I thought were superior to me were kind of fading away in the last year and a half. And at the end, I ended up at the top of the class out of pure determination, I guess, and came out with an honors degree at the end. So it all worked out, and it was an amazing experience because it's not an academic experience for me. In the art school, it's all about critique. It's all about debate. There is no right and wrong. And at university, I didn't realize that. I was always torn from this idea that how come this professor thinks one thing and that one thinks something else? And what's the right answer? And it was only when I got out that I realized there is no right or wrong. There's just the person in charge, and it's just one opinion against the other. And that critique that we did at university, one, it was quite a lot of fun for us because you work really hard and then you would come into your critique at the end of a long process, and they really forced you to do explain yourself and explain why you did something, and your marks were more based off of your explanation than the quality of your work. And I think that's why I got through at the top of the class, because I learned how to explain and rationalize, and I could take criticism well. And all of these are the things that are the foundation of everything that came after that. So if there's anything I leave from my experience at Cal State Long Beach is this ability to verbally explain myself and hold my ground, but also take criticism well. And it was quite fun while we did it. You know, there was always a glass of wine involved if you wanted one. Cheese and crackers. You know, critiques, art departments are full of fun along with the pain. Artists love feeling the pain of success somewhere along the line. But the other thing that they told me a lot was that I was never going to make a living at this. So like, you're a fine artist, you're going to struggle. You don't make money doing this. You do it because you love it. There's that word love again. So when I got out of university, I was assuming I wasn't going to make a living being an artist. How could I fund my art passion? And I lived in Newport Beach, so I figured I could sell t-shirts, design t-shirts, sell them to tourists in the summer, fund my painting habit for the winter. Turns out it was the reverse. I went to a printer, started designing some t-shirts, but he was short on labor. I ended up working for him. I ended up learning how to do screen printing, how to understand the process, had to sell my own t-shirts. So there goes my business side of it, had to decide whether the pricing was right. And then the determination of explaining why my art was the right thing transferred through to this. But it was a fairly, it was fun, relaxing. We'd shut shop if there was surf. We weren't really out to make a lot of money. And I had a really strong and determined girlfriend at the time who says, "You're better than this. You know, I know that you're enjoying yourself, but you need to try for something more." And I did. I went out and looked for a job. First job I looked for was with Ocean Pacific. For those of you that are a little bit older, know that in the mid 80s, it was a quite big beachwear company. And again, I came across this same obstacle that I had at university and at school, where I got the job because of my understanding of the screen print process, because not a lot of designers have that. My illustration skills were okay, not great, but I got in because of my diverse kind of background, not just my illustration. Came into a studio with 10 designers that were really good illustrators, better than me. So I switched taxing. I'm not going to be able to add value by being better than these guys. I can add value by being diverse and doing a different look and different feel, so that you have more things to offer your customers. And it worked really well. I didn't try to compete with them. I just found something that was missing in the mix. And that's another kind of message that has come through the years. I keep doing that, finding the gap in the market and helping people fill that gap. And it made my designs really successful. And I got a little bit big-headed about it. To be fair, I went to my boss and said, "Look, you guys are selling 1 million of my t-shirts. I deserve a cut from this." So another big lesson I learned along the way is from my mentor at this job that I work at OP. His name was Don Daly. And it's kind of an old take on an old saying, but it takes an army to make a t-shirt. And he proceeded, instead of telling me yes or no, he took me and introduced me to the guys on the shipping dock. He introduced me to the people doing the screen printing. He introduced me to the accounting department. And he said, "Yeah, your designs are great, but if these people weren't here, your designs would be nothing. So don't, get back in your box," basically. And it's not just you, it takes everybody. And no one person can do anything without, a greater body of work. And that stuck with me as well. It's super important to understand that no matter how successful you are, it's not down to you alone, and that you better make sure that the people that are important in the process are taken care of.
Quick question, Jay. Someone was curious about the role that mentorship played in your journey, and you were just speaking on it now. I'm curious if you have any advice or insight on maybe ways to cultivate a relationship with a mentor, or identify and build that relationship, so you can kind of have that guidance like you did.
I think it's down to the mentor. I mean, I've had 2 or 3, well, even more. I mean, the reason I stayed in the painting department, and it's really sad that I can't remember the gentleman's name, but my painting teacher had this ability to know when I was frustrated, but didn't like say, oh, come on, pick yourself up, keep going. He had this ability to just come and start having a conversation with me. And he found a way to motivate me. And like, he could see me like starting to pack up my paints and being frustrated that I wasn't getting anywhere. And then he'd come have a chat with me. Next thing I know, it's like 5 hours later and I'm still there. So mentors are people who just instinctively know what help people need. I had a mentor at Warner Brothers much later, just recently. And his role was to do absolutely nothing, but listen to me. And every solution came out of myself because I'd already had 20 years experience. So that mentor was a very different person to the mentor I had when I was at Cal State Long Beach. And Don was the same way. He saw that, he must have saw something in me because it wasn't the same with everybody. He must have saw that I wasn't just an illustrator, that I was interested in other things. So it really comes down to the person. I think, you really, all my mentors found me, except for the final person that I'd had as a business mentor recently. All the other ones were people who just saw something. So it's really down to the mentor in my experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very genuine, organic process.
Yeah, it's not everybody. It's a rare person who can sense the right thing to do for the individual. If it's a formula and it's the same for everybody, they're bad at it. I've been lucky. I think success, a big part of success is luck. And I've been lucky to have 3 or 4 really strong mentors along the way. That message is like really key to me. Like, it's always stuck. I tell it to everybody over and over. People who know me, kind of check my sanity sometimes. So I bring it up, on a weekly basis almost. It's really important to remember everybody along the journey and who's with you. Anything else at that point?
No, I think you can keep going. Yeah.
So the next big turning point in the things that I've realized is recognizing your opportunities. And this is the kind of the opposite of the mentor, kind of recognizing people. Mentors can help you recognize your opportunities. Like I said, the professor in my painting class was really good at telling me, inspiring me to do things that I didn't really think I wanted to do. The one teacher I remember at Cal State Long Beach, his name was John Lincoln. He was the person that I was the most frustrated and probably disliked the most in my whole education. And in hindsight, he's the person I remember the most. And the things that he taught me were the things that were the most important to me. So sometimes your mentor isn't always your best friend either. But recognizing those opportunities, Don Daly was really good at this, but sometimes they can't help you. So I was at OP, I was doing really well. They liked what I was doing. They wouldn't really want to pay me much more. So there's a point where you got to say, okay, am I too comfortable? Is it time to push and go out of my comfort zone? And there was a company that was a subsidiary of OP that was starting to try to figure out how to do graphics on computers. This is before Mac, so that shows you how long I've been around. And I just saw it as an opportunity, and they were new, but it was a risk because they hadn't even started as a company. And I started spending a lot of time with these people on my own, and when they needed help, I'd help them, and they'd come into the studio and ask questions about design, and I would help. And eventually they offered me a job as the art director at double the price I was getting at OP. It was a big risk. It was a brand new company, but it was still a great opportunity at that point because I wasn't really going anywhere else. And it was a risk because they went out of business in a year, started freelancing, which was also a risk, but people kept working for me. So my pay was going up. I was learning more. I was doing diverse things. I had to do different things as a freelance designer than I did for this startup. And I was still doing freelance for my old boss, Don Daly again. And eventually he came back and said, oh, would you be interested in coming back and working at OP? And it was well, I'm making almost 3 times what I did when I worked here before. So no, not unless you double my salary, jokingly. And he said, okay, but you have to do more. There's more to your job. You know, we're not going to pay you that to do the same thing you did. And this is one, another really important thing, you know, in a career that, you know, never push your position unless you already are in a strong position. And so I didn't need the job, but because I was so confident in where I was, it opened up this other door. But it was a risk because I had to do things I didn't know anything about. I didn't know about manufacturing. I didn't really know about designing garments. I didn't know about importing from the Far East and what duties were and what margins were. And he gave me all this to do because he thought I could handle it. But I had to prove myself. I had a 3-month trial, and I passed the trial. And in 2 years, I was VP of product development for them for the knitwear top business. 2 years before that, I knew nothing about knitwear top. So you need that mentor to help you along the way, but you also have to feel confident that you can do it. And all of these challenges have always come from those very early kind of observations about that. I talked about the things that I love about, you know, the human condition. It's really about who you're working with. You're negotiating prices. Why are they doing things the way they do? First time I went to the Far East on a manufacturing trip, I thought that people really liked me because they took me out for dinner. They got me really drunk and everything. God, these guys are nice. And the next morning I was so hungover, and they're all sitting there, you know, negotiating prices, trying to make me pay more for something. And all I wanted to do was go back to my room and sleep. So basically, they were just trying to wear me out so that I wouldn't be a good negotiator. And you learn these things. So human condition, all those things I loved still kept coming up. So this was great. But then another important thing is to never rest on your laurels, never think that you're finished, always push forward and keep your head up. Because this business was going south, different people started showing up. There's a lot of people from the financial industry and banks that started showing up, and we were a beachwear company. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to start looking for another job. And my wife's English, and we've been married along this route. I don't have enough time to tell you that story, but we were thinking about moving back to the UK. So thinking there was opportunity there. There was a very poor service industry in the UK at the time. My wife was missing her family. And we said, let's start looking. And a job popped up. And we didn't know where they wanted it, but they flew us to England, and which was great. They paid for it. We still weren't sure. They offered me the job, still weren't sure. They offered to pay for us to move and paid for our housing for 6 months. So it's kind of the decision was made for us. It was time to make a jump again. Another big risk. But the company, the OP company I work for, the licensee that I was working for, they went out of business 6 months later. So it was a good risk to take. So we moved from here, the lovely crowded beach of Newport, to here, the lovely countryside of England, which I've been here for 30 years. And I love this part of the world. Never would have thought I'd ever, I've been, you know, surfing Newport Beach from the age of 12 until 30. I never, ever thought I'd be moving to a small island that's freezing cold and raining most of the time. But you get a lot of good weather like this as well. So we moved here, but my next lesson was fake it till you make it, because we were on the plane coming. We'd already committed. We were moving. Everything was on a boat. We were on a plane. And I turned to my wife and said, when I get there, I got to get a Mac. I got to get a Mac computer. She says, why? And I said, well, because they hired me to start the studio, but they also hired me to teach them how to use a Mac. And she says, so why do you need a Mac? Then they're going to get you one. I said, because I don't know how to use it. And she kind of says, oh, now you tell me you took a job that you don't know what you're doing, and we're moving countries. And I said, yeah, but they don't know either. So as long as I'm 1 week ahead of them, I'm teaching them something. And that's, you know, a good granddad story to tell over the years, but it's true. And it forced me to do it. Like, I worked with people. I had a team of people working on these computers, but I didn't know how to use them. And this was one of those moments where it was a big opportunity. If I didn't do it, it was going to be a big problem. So I'm a big procrastinator at times. And these are the types of things that really galvanize my focus. And I learned it and it made a big difference. It was a 1-year consulting contract with a textile printing company. So now I'm in manufacturing and printing. Used to be an illustrator. Turns out that the owners were getting a little bit tired of the business. They wanted to go on a sabbatical. So they said they wanted me to run the print factory. So now I'm not just running the studio, I'm also running a print factory that I know nothing about in a country that I've only moved to 12 months earlier. And this is a big shift in my career. So managing is very different than doing. So up to this point, I was always doing. I was the one doing. And if I worked harder, I came in earlier, I left later, I got reward for that. This became very different. Now I got a print factory with 100 people printing T-shirts that are from Glasgow. And if you know Glasgow, they kind of speak English, but their accent is so thick, you can't hardly understand them. And I'm the kind of California transplant. If those of you who know Ted Lasso show, I was the Ted Lasso of textile printing. I walked into this place in a culture that I knew nothing about. And I learned a lot about that. So you think you're going to be, you know, like Don Daly said, better together. You all got to work together to make a better living. Didn't quite work out that way. Teamwork didn't look the way that I thought it did. Teamwork meant you do all the work. You know, we're not happy with what you're doing. I rallied the whole company saying, look, you know, I know that you guys aren't happy, but, you know, let's decide together what we do next. We'll vote on any things that are contentious. And the only question I got was, what if I don't want to vote? So that brought up the challenges and still came back to Don Daly, how you can't do anything on your own. And that's the thing that I just remember. Another.
I'm curious, Jay, so it sounds like talking about this kind of transition in your career, going into managing and talking about the importance of teamwork. It sounds like there's like a lot of leadership involved in that. And so I'm curious what you feel like is like the most, or one like particular like valuable leadership skill that people should be intentional to kind of hone and develop as they go throughout their career journey?
Well, I go back to those points about the things that I said that I eventually found out that I loved doing. And also the part of my degree course where we were doing critique. So the ability to communicate and have empathy. The most important thing is emotional intelligence. You know, being somebody who doesn't have academic intelligence per se, would probably say emotional intelligence is important, but almost every management course I've been on since, and every course that Warner Brothers has sent me on over the years, always goes back to emotional intelligence. So it's really about understanding the human condition. Like I said earlier, no two situations are the same. So kind of leading people and managing people are very different. Yeah. Coaching, leading, and managing are not the same thing. So recognizing those three things and the difference of them is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think for people from an artistic background, empathy and emotional intelligence may be a little bit more natural. So for people who may not particularly come from that background, do you have any advice for like how they can, I guess, build their empathy and like their emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's not that easy. I mean, they don't have to necessarily either, because again, that's where a team of people comes in. You know, what makes a good team is not a bunch of people who are the same. What makes a good team are a bunch of people that are different. So if that's not your strength, make sure you have people around you who have that strength. So I don't know if anyone, you know, is familiar with the classic Myers-Briggs personality test. Big corporations throw those at you every few years that kind of define your emotional profile. You know, whether you're you know, focused on emotion or facts, or you know, you're an introvert or an extrovert. And the purpose of this is to really highlight your weaknesses and make sure that you build a team that helps support those weaknesses. So I have people on my team who are constantly, I'm more on the practical side. I'm the guy who's looking at the facts and and is very rational. And sometimes I don't always have as much time for the emotional side. Maybe it's my own defense mechanism, but I've got people on my team who are very comfortable telling me when I've missed something. And it's important for me to be open to listening to them. I think that's the thing, that you can't always be everything in every person. If it's not your comfort zone, make sure you find somebody who does have that and work with them closely. So I'm aware of time. We got about 15 minutes, and I'm just coming to the final aha moment or recognizing opportunity. So this print factory was in a very similar position. It's a textile printing business is very much a cash flow issue problem. So it's a seasonal business, and every year you're trying to get over the hump whether you got enough cash flow to get through the next year. And it was clear that these guys weren't willing to invest. It wasn't going to survive. Time to look for something. Also, we had our first child, my son, and I was working away from home, so I was sacrificing my family life to make to make this business work. My wife and I were kind of diversifying. We went to a new country, so we didn't want all our eggs in one basket. We were doing two different things, and I had to live away from home to do that on the weekdays anyway. So now that Taylor, our son, was born, I wanted to live at home, so I started looking for work. One, because I wanted to be close to him and my wife, and two, because this company was starting to feel insecure. And that's when I found the Warner Brothers job. And to take that job, I had to take a pay cut. It's another key thing. Sometimes the opportunity doesn't come with more money, but I had to take a pay cut. I got the job, though, because of all that past experience. Again, this idea that I understood the production process. I understood multiple types of product development. I was the design background. I had sales. I understood licensing. And that's why I was hired 25 years ago to go to Warner Brothers. Big competitors, as you probably all know. Most people know Disney more than they know Warner Brothers. But about 10 years in, Disney called me and said, would you be interested in coming to work for us? And I really wasn't, for sure, but I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to talk. And at this time, I was at the same place I was with the job at OP, where I was kind of at the top of my game. They weren't going to pay me any more money. I was doing the most I could with the responsibility they'd given me. And Disney was offering me more money, but strangely enough, less responsibility and a more focused job. So I wasn't keen on it, but I was keen on the money. But I was very loyal to Warner Brothers. So I went to my boss and said, look, you need to know that Disney's talking to me, but I don't want to leave. But I have a new son. I'm gonna seriously consider it, but I don't want to leave you in a lurch. So just so you know, I am talking to him. I'm seriously considering it. And that was with my boss in London. And within 12 hours, the president of consumer products in LA called me and said, we don't want you to leave. And what do we need to do to make you stay? And then that's when they offered me a VP position. Without that Disney lure, they never would have, but I'd never recommend threatening somebody, an employer, with something like this unless you're willing to leave, because most times they'll just say, thank you very much, it was nice working with you. So you always have to make sure that if you're going to be in that position, you have to know that you might take it. In hindsight, I'm so pleased that I stayed. That was 15 years ago. Since then, I've learned so many different things. The role at Disney doesn't exist anymore. It was a single thing. It was working on one brand in one product category. And my my WB job was across all of those brands that John had talked about earlier when we started. And since then, I've got involved in many more facets of the business. So it was the right thing in the end. So from that point on, it was all about focus. Focus. And I was done. I wasn't looking for anything else. I was, VP of the second largest region in the world. I had a lot of influence at the global level. They even made me head of marketing for a period of time in between one of the the 6 reorgs and the 4 major mergers that I've been through in the 25 years. And the way I got through those is by focusing on my task. So thinking about this talk, I was thinking, what have I learned from all of these experiences? And there's just 4 or 5 things that I think are really key. One is be careful when you make complaints about others. That job at OP that my boss gave me, he gave me that because I kept telling him I could do a better job than these other people. But what I found out was that, be careful because you don't know what you don't know. And when I got these jobs, I realized, wow, I shouldn't have been so hard on these people. This is really hard. There's a lot of problems. So since then, whenever I come up against somebody that kind of gets under my skin and I don't think they're doing the right job, instead of complaining about them, I try to find out more about what they do and find out more about what their challenges are. And it relieves me of a lot of stress. The other thing is make yourself invaluable. So don't self-promote yourself, self-promote the person you work for. And pick the right person. So, get on the right team. And I find that whether it's with Warner Brothers or with a retailer that I'm working with or a brand, what I try to do is make the person that I'm working for look good. And if I make them look good and they get ahead, then I get ahead. If you try to self-promote yourself, it's pretty obvious to most senior people, and it's quite annoying. So just make yourself invaluable. That's a really important fact. Something I learned very late in life was deal with conflict resolution up front. I was known at Warner Brothers with the HR department as the guy that everybody wanted to work for because I was a pushover, because I just wanted everybody to be happy, and I hate conflict. And what I learned probably in the last 5 years is dealing with conflict right up front. You get a lot more respect and everybody learns a lot more from it. And people are very clear about what's expected of them. So all of these points of, you want to lead, you want to fight, you want to compromise, really focus on that center point about dealing with conflict, and everybody will be much clearer. They might not be happy, but they'll be really clear on what you're focusing on. This point is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily play in today's trends on jobs and the flexibility and the gig economy and so forth. But I'm an advocate of play the long game. Life's a marathon, not a sprint. I have a lot of little sprints along the way, but never think that it's the end game. Always think ahead. Always prove yourself, and then make yourself indispensable, and then you're in a position of leverage, and the chances of people wanting to keep you around are much greater. And I say that with experience of literally coming through 3 of the biggest mergers in the history of commerce, of Warner Brothers and AOL, where the stock price went from $70 a share down to $10.50. And then it went back up to 113 when AT&T was sniffing around, and then it went back down to $40, and now it's been merged again with Discovery, and we've gone down again, but it will come back up again. And it's playing a long game because these are all just waves in the world, and it's important to always keep your eye moving forward. So in the end, you kind of have these different points in your life where you have risk versus security. So that art scan, that new startup was a risk. Freelancing was a risk. But going back to Ocean Pacific was secure. I could get a paycheck and a mortgage. Moving to England, big risk. But once I got here and was grounded in the culture, and getting a job at Warner Bros. Allowed me to raise a family and have a fruitful 25-year career. The Disney thing was a risk, bringing that to my boss, but it paid out in the end. So finally, these key things to help make you stand out in the type of world that I've grown up in business anyway, is be prepared for every scenario. So, I started out at university with a fine art degree. I ended up being a t-shirt entrepreneur, then became a screen print expert, moved into textile manufacturing, importing textiles, print factory management, learned the sales trade, licensing at Warner Brothers, turned into trend analysis to look at the next big thing. Retail, when retail was king 5 years ago. Now the consumer drives everything with the internet. So consumer insights have been important to me. And now in a stressed economy where inflation is out of control, where you're looking for cost savings, systems and processes are key to what I do. And in the end, I'll come back to my main goal after I retire and focus on being an artist. But it all goes back to this idea, every one of those things that I showed in that previous slide, it's about I love solving problems. So almost every one of those things, especially systems and processes, I never would have thought when I was a fine art major that I'd love coming up with a more efficient process, but that's just as creative as painting a picture to me. Understanding the human condition is the key thing. That's where the human, the emotional intelligence comes from. And I've watched salespeople give the same presentation over and over to people and see their eyes roll back in their head. You need to watch the people and know what's important to them. And then this idea of love looking for things people don't have time to see. When the first design course I took, the teacher told me that I'm not going to teach you to draw. I'm going to teach you to see like a child. And seeing like a child means that, kids see things for the first time. And as you get older, you kind of store memories and take things for granted. And that's the thing that's kept me relevant in 45 years with a business, is the fact I never take anything for granted. I look at everything as if it's the first time I've seen it and find out what's the best way to deal with that now, not based off of the way that I dealt with it 10 years ago. And it keeps me going. I'm not bored. I could work for another 20 years easy. I don't think my wife would let me, but I'll find something to do when this is over as well. So yeah, that's the end of our presentation. The key thing that I talked about at the very beginning, love what you do, is the kind of the key to everything. And I just left a slide there for anybody have any questions at the end of this? Got a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, appreciate you putting together this presentation. Is very well put together. You have someone in the chat who is asking if you need help where they live in the Middle East. And so it's clear, quite a bit of people have interest in working for a company like Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So I guess what advice would you give to people who are looking to get hired by a large company like Warner?
There is a jobs board for Warner. It would be Warner Discovery now, so it wouldn't be Warner Brothers. It would be under Warner Brothers Discovery. But there is a public job board. LinkedIn is still invaluable. You're going to find everything that you can on LinkedIn. I know people would like, is there any help that I could give them? The best help I can give them is the information that I have. There's 40,000 people that work at Warner Brothers Discovery. Somebody mentioned the Middle East. It's a huge growth area for us. It's one of the biggest growth areas at the moment. We don't have affiliate offices in the Middle East. We go through agents. So, there's in the business working with companies like Warner Brothers and Disney and Universal, you have the parent companies, but you also have licensees and you have agents. So it's a big community. So there's other ways in to the company. Production companies are another way. And, a lot of people will take any job to try to get in, but I'm not sure that that's the right path to go, because you got to make sure that there's an exit path. So, taking a job as a PA to become a screenwriter is maybe, I'm not a fan of that. It's not that it hasn't happened before, but if you want to be a screenwriter, I think you're better off trying to find a production company and being a runner and making tea and coffee, as opposed to, working in another division that doesn't relate to the area of interest to you. I think that's important to remember.
So we have another question from the Q&A. And they want to know if you would recommend creatives be more specialists or generalists. This person is a design generalist, but has been consistently told to niche down. So what are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, that goes back to my, the challenges that I had when I was at university about, picking a a speciality. I think being a generalist gives you more options in the broader world, outside of the creative field. So, within business, I think the fact that I was a generalist got me to where I am today. But if I was a specialist in one specific thing, I probably would have gotten half as far as I did. That doesn't mean that's not the right path for some people. That's the difference between managing and doing. So being a generalist will get you into management. Being a specialist will get you to be an expert in a particular field.
Very distinguished. Another question we have is, how do you keep updated in latest trends in design or business?
A little bit of everything. So listening to, sharing with everybody else, but I have touch points with retailers and licensees, consumer trend forecast groups. But the thing that I get the most from is just being up to date socially with what, not in social media, but on what's going on in the world, what's going on in finance, and watching people, not in a creepy way, but just watching people, how they act. We get research, but I prefer to go to retail and watch how people interact with product, what makes, and understanding what people's lives are like. Sometimes people who are trying to define trends tend to spend too much time in their own industry. Trends are basically being a student of history. If you're a good history or sociology major, you'll be good at trends because everything is based off of something that happened before.
So this is a fun question. What has been your best project you worked on and why?
I guess most people would say, gosh, there's so many of them, but a lot of people are big fans of Harry Potter. And there was a point in licensing where Harry Potter wasn't that popular, and I was the one keeping it alive. And I had a lot of interaction with the filmmakers and David Heyman, the producers of the Harry Potter films, and spent a lot of time on the sets. So I've had a 20-year relationship with the Harry Potter franchise, which I'm very proud of. But the opposite of that, that's a very successful. And the opposite of that is I was also involved in doing licensing programs for the European Football Championships and the Olympics. And I found both of those really rewarding because those are event-based things specific for a particular moment in time where you're kind of building a story and an environment for a particular moment, for a particular culture. So I had, I did football programs with Poland and Ukraine, which really seemed really poignant to me now with all the troubles that are there. And I've done them in Spain, and I've done them in Germany and Austria and Switzerland. And those are the things, just solving other people's problems and people being happy with the results. That's what I've liked the most. Yeah, that makes me tired when I look at that. We make a lot of stuff, and you can see like the Fabergé egg for Game of Thrones is a $1 million Fabergé egg, and then we also make $2 bottles of beer for the same brand. So there's never a dull moment, and that again goes back to that, like fixing things, challenges, and it's constantly evolving. There's nothing that ever stays the same. That's what I like about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. And thank you, John. This has been just truly an incredible chat. Loved absolutely hearing everything that you had to say, learned so much. And that last little video clip, I love that I saw something that I own.
Oh, excellent.
So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I just want to say thanks so much. And Jay, if people were looking to get in touch with you or had any questions for you, how might they be able to do that? Is that like LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn's open. You can definitely do that. I think you guys are quite good. I get questions and people asking for chats through your through the when I was doing the mentoring program. I think people can contact me through there as well. I've had one-to-one conversations with people through there as well, which I'm totally happy to do.
Wonderful. On Beach Nexus, I think is what you're giving us a plug for.
Yeah, yeah. That's it.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
I
those
wanna
are probably the two most obvious places for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much, Jay. Thank you so much. And we are at time for
Yeah,
this
we're a bit
chat.
over time. I apologize for that.
Yeah, so we want to say thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in today. Again, this is going to be available online at www.csulb.edu/alumni, so you can share with all your friends.
Can
So
I bring up one bit about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
video that I showed? Technically, it shouldn't be, probably shouldn't show that, only because it's an internal video and we don't have the music rights and we're a licensing company.
okay,
We don't like to share things that we don't actually have.
Thanks for letting us know. We will
My
work to
lawyers
make
aren't
sure
too
that that's
keen
not in
on
there.
that part, so we have to make sure we don't infringe other people's rights.
Absolutely. All right. So I will say thank you so much for everyone who is tuned in. Jay, John, if you could hang back for just a moment while everyone filters out. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm going.